After Odysseus and his men journeyed to the land of the dead and conversed with their spirits there, they continued on their voyage back to their home island of Ithaca. Following their departure, the men were still covered in black sheep's blood that was used to summon the ghosts. They traveled on the sea for another day before all their supplies and food were swept overboard as a result of Poseidon's lingering rage. Poseidon, the protector of the seas, was angered by the insensitivity and carelessness of Odysseus' men. Their trash and waste were thrown off the side of the ship, angering Poseidon. Even after Poseidon threatened to sink their final ship and everyone on board, one of Odysseus' crewmates named Nikos, a young fisherman who grew up on Ithaca's nearby island of Tapos, threw one final piece of waste into the sea and hit a dolphin on the fin. This insult towards the sacred animal of Poseidon was the last abuse towards the god of the sea and everything important to him. Odysseus threw his trident to create giant waves to sweep off all supplies shortly after Odysseus and his men left the land of the dead. Right before they polished off the last of their rations they were able to save, the men saw a lush island covered with all they needed far off in the distance. They pulled onto the shore and searched for any sign of life so that they could pay their respects to the unknowing host. As the men continued heading inward, they heard rustling coming from the bushes nearby. Emerging from the sides of the path came 3 chipmunks garbed in the primary colors of light. One wore a red shirt, the second wore a blue shirt, and the last wore a green shirt.
The first chipmunk introduced himself as Alvinus, the leader of the chipmunk trio. The second introduced himself as Simonius, the brains behind the trio. The third called himself Theodorus, the sidekick to the other 2. These were not ordinary chipmunks because they were born at an affair Zeus had with a magical singing tree. Their mother's magical ability was passed down to them, and they were granted the ability to force listeners to do as they say. Hera was outraged at yet another affair Zeus had and punished the chipmunks by sending them to a distant, abandoned island. Along with this punishment, Hera also removed their magical singing abilities and put them in a nut tree hidden on the far side of the island. After Odysseus and his men met these island natives, Alvinus invited them to stay in their treehouse, where they were welcome to sleep and eat as they pleased. Alvinus and the others led their guests to the tree house, where an assortment of fruits and nuts were already prepared. As the men sat down to feast, the furry creatures rushed off. Odysseus found this strange and disrespectful due to the Greek culture of hosts offering food and dining with their guests. Odysseus, the intelligent traveler, decided to discreetly follow his suspicious hosts to their meeting place. Keen enough to know not to make a noise, Odysseus found the chipmunks around an old campfire. As he approached the fire, he heard them quietly discussing their plans for their guests in the form of a song.
Our true intentions we must discuss, but do it in quiet to gain their trust. The slaying of sheep would make us go nuts, but slaughtering the men would seem unjust. Their feast of nuts just written to our will. They notice the genetic fruits should make them easier to kill. Their senses multiply and they will feel ill. We'll distract their blood or they can help us stand still.
As Odysseus overheard this vile plan, he knew he had to return to his men immediately and warn them of what was to come. When he came back, he saw that Alvinus, Simonius, and Theodorus had already returned to the treehouse. The fruit and nuts were cleared off the table by the hungry men. Odysseus knew it was too late to prevent the hallucinations, but he could attempt to think of a plan to save his men.
Odysseus quickly came up with a plan to try and save his crewmates. To not seem suspicious, Odysseus informed the chipmunks and his men that he was going to go and check the ship's anchors to make sure it was secure and would not float away. When he got outside of the treehouse, he called out for anyone that could help him. Out of nowhere, a sand fairy appeared and told of who she was and how she could help him. The sand fairies were created by Hera to punish the chipmunks and prevent them from leaving the island. This magical fairy informed Odysseus of a pomegranate tree with pomegranates that will reverse the effects of the hallucinogenic nuts, along with possessing the ability to kill the chipmunks. Once Odysseus found the pomegranate tree, he extracted the juices and placed them in a bottle of wine to disguise the scent from Alvinus, Simonius, and Theodorus. He returned to the treehouse and spun a masterful tale of how he recovered the bottle from the ship and how he wanted to offer it to his hospitable hosts. Just as Odysseus had hoped, Alvinus proposed a toast and wanted everyone to drink with him. Alvinus, Theodorus, and Odysseus and his men all drank from their glasses, but Simonius was hesitant and, as the intelligent one, found out what Odysseus had done rather quickly. In a panic, Nikos and another crewmate unfroze from their sluggish movements and attempted to force the pomegranate and wine concoction down Simonius' throat. Nikos and the other man were like slugs on a rock, inching to prevent the earthworm from eating them before it even got the chance. The earthworm was still much quicker, however, and the slugs were unable to escape their demise. Nikos and the crewmen were faced with the sharp, fatal bite of a chipmunk. Odysseus realized that he had to leave behind some of the men and was extremely distraught because this action is looked down upon by all Greeks. The poor Nikos, the fearful sailor, and another unlucky man were the three left behind on the island. Nikos and the sailor had already met the face of death, and the lonely man left alone on the island with Simonius' despair for his fallen brothers would most likely meet death shortly after. As Odysseus and his few remaining men hurriedly escaped the island, the dead bodies and the loner's face of fear could still be seen until the island was out of sight.